with selling a print about back to the pirate humping a woman in an outhouse with a dog humping the leg, if you can manage to figure out how to get somebody to buy that and pay a bill with it, you've won. You fucking won, man.
Hello, print friends, and welcome to Outlaw October, a month-long deep dive into the hearts and minds of the outlaw printmakers. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. Each week, I chat with artists who use print-based media to do something beyond the expected, and this month we're doing something a little different. An exploration into one corner of the print world, the outlaw printmakers. Who they are, what they do, and what the heck makes an outlaw an outlaw. This is a bilingual podcast, so if you subscribe to us, you'll be getting episodes in English with me, as well as in Spanish with Ronaldo Gil Zambrano. Together we speak to printmakers around the globe about their practice and passions in the world of printmaking. Okay, print friends, if you've been listening along, then you probably know there is a month-long printmaking event coming to Santa Fe, New Mexico called Print Santa Fe. And you might have picked up on that in the last weekend of that month, that's going to be April 2023, there is a 3-day print fair. That's April 28th, 29th, and 30th. But there's also so much more. Exhibitions, a print exchange, and 2 juried exhibitions that will be opening in Austin and Santa Fe next year. So basically, I can't stress enough that this is a really cool opportunity to maybe get your work out there, get involved in the print scene a little bit. But the deadline for much of this is November 1st, so do not dilly-dally. Get on that link in the show notes or go to printsantafe.org for more info. Hello Print Friend is brought to you by Speedball Art Products, and you know they are getting in the spirit of things here for Outlaw October. My guest this week is Tom Hück, and Speedball is generously donating 25 sheets of their beautiful Arnheim paper in warm white, size 22 by 30 inches. That's a personal favorite of Mr. Hück. So head on over to the Hello Print Friend Instagram account, check out this episode's announcement, and you'll see details on how to enter. In this episode, Tom and I talk about what it's like to make some of the most beloved and controversial images in contemporary printmaking, selling affordable works to young collectors and full suites to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, his heroes, and the Tom Hück ethos. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to have the Tom Hück experience with the one and only. Hi, Tom. How's it going?
Hey, how you doing? What the hell you want to ask?
Welcome to your long overdue guest spot on the Hello Print Friend podcast.
Yes, it is long overdue, Miranda.
But I'm glad that we waited because
I have to make it known. I turned you down.
You did.
Say, I turned you down.
Yep, it's on the record. It's on the record.
But now I'm okay.
And now we're getting to meet in the beautiful Black Rock Editions Landfall Press headquarters here in Santa Fe in person.
This is where it should be because I owe my whole career to this place.
It's beautiful, right?
Yeah. And Jack Lemon and Steve Campbell and Chris, they're awesome. But especially to Jack, I owe my career.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to make a living off of prints having not gone to Landfall in 1999. So they got me started on the path to being an independent, and Jack telling me, you know, you can do this, Hück. You've just got to do it right, and you got to do it hard. And it has been very hard. I took that as well as some hard living as well, but also hard work.
Definitely, definitely. So I feel like it's completely appropriate.
It's
and
perfect.
I'm going to ask you to just answer the 3 questions I ask all my guests at the beginning, which is who you are, where you are, what you do.
Okay. My name's Tom Hück. I'm a printmaker. I do woodcuts, and my shop is called Evil Prints, and it's existed since 1995. Disgusting the masses since 1995. That was a line I came up in my 20s. I don't know if I'd do it now, but that's what got stuck.
That's what it is. Beautiful.
And I live and work near St. Louis. My shop was in downtown St. Louis for 20-something years. And when COVID hit, I moved my shop I made it private, and I moved it out to my property in southern Missouri, about an hour out of downtown St. Louis.
Wonderful.
And I just make prints for a living, and that's what I've been doing really since 1995. I mean, I taught for many years in there, but my shop existed outside of, I didn't use the school's facilities at all. Evil Prints always had to exist on its own, and it had its own non-existent budget, which the bills were paid from print to print, which is still the way it is today. I live print to print,
I definitely want to make sure we get a chance later on to talk about the living life of someone who is making a living off their prints and making that happen and doing exciting projects.
Oh, I'll let you know all about it.
Yeah, but I want to acknowledge that you're just coming off a great interview with the wonderful Ann Schaefer and Ben Levy on the Plate Mark podcast.
Ann rules. She's
Ann
great.
is a treasure.
Yes, she is.
And so you got to dive in there for a lot of the kind of lead-up stuff. We heard the great stories about you getting to see Dürer in the Vatican and then in D.C. and having these great supportive parents and all of that, which often we dive into on this podcast. So I think I'm going to encourage everyone to go listen to that. And we're going to pick up kind of where that narrative was running out of time, which is
cool.
Like when you're starting to make work that's really sort of finding your voice, when you've decided you're going to make some work about your hometown, about where you're from. And you do this series, The Bloody Bucket. And so I guess my first question would be, when you first started to make work that really felt like your voice and you started to make work that was getting a lot of attention. And The Bloody Bucket is not an easy series.
None of it is.
None of it is. So you set the bar. And so if you were getting maybe positive feedback and negative feedback, strong reactions probably early on, what was that like for you? Were you just like, yes, this is my voice? Were you like, fuck yeah, attention? Or did you have any doubts that maybe this wasn't going to be a sustainable thing to do?
The thing is, I never made the work for anybody else but myself first. I made prints that I wanted to look at. Okay, so in a weird way, that kind of is a shield from criticism. I mean, everybody takes criticism in different ways, and they take it personally when it's you selling your ass, basically, and putting yourself out there in your own work. And the moment that you really find that you're doing what is in your id and what you're trying to say, you open yourself up to all kinds of stuff. I mean, I get a lot of criticism in my work for being immature, sexist, too much violence, too much sex, all that stuff. And it goes back to, hey, make it a nicer world and I'll make nicer prints. I'm like Hogarth. I'm like Goya. Dürer too, to a certain extent. Posada. They're my benchmark. And I want to make prints that are as good as those prints. That's my daily goal. And when you care about the history like I do, this is a long-term game. So any sort of criticism that's leveled my way about the subject matter, it's just a short storm to ride out. I have to live to fight the next print out, you know? And so I guess I take it. Sometimes it bothers me that the work is sort of put into it can't be taken seriously conceptually because it's just satire. Fuck you, come on, man. My stuff is just as conceptual as the latest stuff that's being pushed at Berkeley or God knows CalArts or whatever place, okay? And I spend a lot of time thinking about every single visual move that I make. These days, I work very differently than I worked with The Bloody Bucket. Although there are still hillbillies doing bad things in there. And these days, hillbillies almost overthrew the fucking government, okay?
Right,
so it's not like this, my subject matter isn't going away. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I just make work from my heart and my head, trying to fit into the history of prints. So The Bloody Bucket And then after that, I started doing the large triptychs. Well, the Bloody Bucket was still me like taking real stories that I heard growing up or witnessed and turning them visually into a narrative. These days, I take things that I witness and things that I think and things that I feel politically, and I put them all in one big visual burrito that's multi-layered, and they deal more in allegory and metaphor. There's more surrealism in there. There's more allusions to things that aren't just, oh, there's a woman at a grease pig contest. Look at how crazy that was. I don't do that anymore. It's a broader based social commentary. With some of the old characters and caricatures are still in there someplace, but they're also large. I work really large because I want people to have to deal with it visually. My stuff is not made to go on someone's phone, which is another whole...
Yeah.
That's a whole podcast of bitching and complaining, because my stuff is made to be seen live. You know, taking one of my big woodcuts and putting it on a 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch square on Instaspam or whatever it is, or WikTok and fucking Wok or whatever the latest social media thing is. That's the equivalent. Shrinking it down to a 1 inch by 1 inch or whatever it is the equivalent of like seeing Led Zeppelin live and making them play cardboard instruments. This stuff is made to be seen live and in person, and so that's kind of a drag. But that's a whole other line of questioning.
Yeah, there's a whole podcast episode.
That's
I'm sure.
a whole thing. You should do a round table with people that do traditional media and stuff like this, and have it. What our complaints are about digital media now. I like some stuff with digital media, but, you know, when it has to be viewed as the primary intro on your freaking phone.
Yeah, the ways in which Instagram's affected the market and the way people conceive of art. I mean, that's...
Well, we have a little running joke amongst me and Carlos and even Tony and people like it. It's like when we see work that got 80,000 likes on Instagram, and then you see the stuff in real life at some print fair or whatever, the joke is, boy, they put the Da Vinci filter on that one, didn't they? Because you can literally shrink anything down and put whatever freaking filter on it. It's going to look fantastic. But when you see it in real life, more often than not, it's a letdown.
It's just, it's such completely different experiences, and particularly with the pandemic and so much of artistic consumption being sort of forced to move into the digital space, there are people who just think that this is what art is it's what lives in the computer, that lives in your pocket.
Right.
And
I guess maybe it's old-fashioned. I'm sorry. I still like to see stuff in real life.
Yeah, totally.
You know, did that answer your question?
I think it did. What I was sort of curious about that maybe we didn't exactly touch on was the experience of being a younger artist, where you're still sort of finding your way and making work that's hard and getting the kind of backlash of that challenging work. Did that ever sort of shake you? Or were you just like, this is my voice? Yeah.
I never got a lot of backlash in the art world.
Oh.
I got backlash from the academic world.
Gotcha. Okay, so can you say more about that?
Yeah. I think that it tended to be, the backlash was more from, okay, if we have Hück out here to do a talk at the university, is he going to put up the Hillbilly Kama Sutra and talk about it for an hour in front of 350 art students? And is he? Those are all the different sex positions.
Right.
And is Hück going to curse because the work lends itself to that? Either when you look at my stuff, you're going to go, oh, fuck, what is that guy doing? Or, oh, man, is that guy doing what? You know, there was that backlash. With the art world, somebody like Jack Lemmon at Landfall Press saw my work immediately and was like, okay, this is all the history, social commentary, and satire. I get it. You know, it was print curators immediately jumped on when I was like 23, 24 years old and did that first body of work. They bought it, showed it right away. I was lucky. I was showing in museums at 23 and 24, okay? As a self-publishing printmaker.
Yeah.
Which is, it's still crazy. But the backlash was only for people with rules that were instituted in classrooms. Gotcha. I think I've heard this. A lot of printmaking professors wouldn't show my work to students and that kind of thing because it's a rough world.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the rough world. And students, damn it, need to know about the rough world. But it goes back to a Rob Zombie quote that I always fall back on. Real life rules don't apply to art. They don't. It's like this day and age, it's like, oh, well, if you make a movie about the Nazis, you must like the Nazis. No, it's called social commentary and criticism. And how do you criticize the Nazis without talking about the fucking Nazis? When I depict a Nazi in my work, I put the armband on him, but it's an X in it, which goes back to Charlie Chaplin's movie, The Dictator, The Great Dictator. Okay, there are ways that I allude to it, but I got rid of a swastika one time in my work because somebody said something about it.
Oh, okay.
And then I carved it away, and then it's still there. You can barely see it. And so sometimes that's why I moved away. Some of the criticism maybe made me grow. I moved away from so literal, and I became more allegorical, like a Hogarth would, because not everybody knows what those prints are about now, but the beauty pulls you in, and then you eventually kind of can figure it out with it when you have a title. So the backlash was more from academia, but not from the art world. And I moved out of academia eventually. And it wasn't just because of that. It's just because I couldn't take the rigidity and all that. My personality didn't fit it to begin with.
Yeah. And so when you're making work, like I said, the Hillbilly Collar Suture, the Bloody Bucket, as you can tell, my question was still in like the early works. And you say this is a lot of what you saw growing up. These were stories you growing up. These were real experiences from your formative years. And yet they're very critical. It seems like they're grotesque. Like everyone's sort of transformed into these sort of monstrous characters.
Yeah.
And so I've often wondered, what's it sort of like? Because it seems like it's sort of like a fascinated and repelled, like this sort of investigation of what made Tom, but then also exaggerating it into these forms that are not flattering.
I had a teacher in graduate school. I was having a lot of trouble. And I think I may have said this in Ann's podcast. He came into my studio, and I was having a block. I had horrible crits and everything, and I was having a hard time. And he told me, his name's Douglas Dowd, and he told me he was looking at my sketchbook, and I loved Warrington Colescott, and I loved all these old master printmakers. And Durer's funny.
Yeah.
There are funny things in Rembrandt's prints.
There's a faucet that's supposed to be a penis.
Right.
That kind of stuff in Durer's work.
It's all over all of it. Posada's hilarious. Goya, not as much, but there are funny forms in there. And Doug told me, he's like, Tom, it's okay to be funny. That was a big moment for me because when you're in art school, I think that they tend to try and grind that out of people because everything is so serious all the time.
Yeah.
Everything is so serious. Even though you can take serious subject matter and make it more serious with humor because that makes people think, comedians. But I think my reaction early on visually was to hit people over the head with it, to go the extreme visually with it.
Yeah.
Because
why? Yeah, why?
Because if it's sort of like the monster, if you expect a monster in a movie, it's got to be alien. It needs to be over the top. And visually, there's a lot to compete with out there.
Yeah.
I mean, how in the hell am I really going to compete with any of those Van Eyck depictions of hell. Well, I mean, there's a high bar that's been set visually.
Yeah.
And so these things are things that I experienced, and they were, at that time, small town, sort of rural stories, and every small town has those. Every city has those. It just takes certain people to broadcast them to the rest of the world in whatever media they choose. Me, I assumed that I'm an artist. I'm in the middle of nowhere in terms of the art world. No one knows who I am. I know my history. I know my forefathers and mothers. How am I going to make my impact visually, knowing all the history of depictions and what their circumstances were? What are my circumstances? And what do I want to see? What would get me going, having known all that history? The audience was second row.
Right.
I'm first row, okay? Because it's got to come from me. So my way of doing it was to exaggerate. Visually extreme. There's a print in the Bloody Bucket. It's called Anatomy of a Crack Shack. And it's the most heinous freaking print that I've ever done. I have a full stack of those. I didn't sell them all. I didn't sell a lot of them. But
perfect for any home. Put it in the nursery.
Put it in your bathroom, man. It's of a woman, a guy having sex with a woman who has a wooden leg, and a dog is humping the wooden leg while he's humping the woman. And he's got prosthetics, you know, and it's, you know, how. So my subject was a bar. The whole series is about a bar. Well, people that go to bars, they end up having sex. And so that's part of it. And I was also thinking about the Dance of Death and Holbein's Dance of Death. And death is always there. Well, sex is always there. Two things in life, sex and death. Okay? That's it. Because one begats the other. And so I depicted it like that because I needed to talk about the sex that goes along with bar life. And how do you do it? Well, it was just two people in a bed with a cut blanket over them and a bump of the coupling. It's not going to be the same visually.
Yeah.
This way, it hammers home the point.
So to speak.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty good. It hammers home the point. And it's of the guy is a pirate having sex with a woman in an outhouse. I mean, what's the worst? So when you're making these things up, I'm looking at it like a movie director for effect. What's the worst place that you could have sex? In the outhouse. Okay? How terrible would that be? Well, that's where it is. And at that time, I was thinking about, I'm in the studio, I'm like, don't put that dog in there humping that peg leg, Huck. Don't do it. And then I'm drawing it, and I'm drawing it, and then I'm doing it, and then I put it up there, and I've got it on the block, and I'm like, haha, yeah, that's what it's going to be. And then I live with it, because remember, I'm front row.
Yeah.
I'm the audience first that sees the premiere, okay? And I get to make the decisions. And I don't really care about people getting upset about that stuff because they don't have to look at it. That's sort of the way that I am, and I think that you have to be. A lot of my heroes, I'm sure, were like that too. Tune it out. You can't win them all. I mean, it's my audience is my audience, and I'm not out to win everybody over, although I want everybody to like my work and I want everybody to react to my work. And if people, in a weird way, react negatively to it, maybe that's part of what I want too. I want to be like Bosch. You said that, I think earlier you said that push and pull thing, if that's the way you put it, of intrigue and repulse or whatever. That's Bosch, man. Yeah. I mean, it's scaring people off, and then you're like, oh my God, what is that couple doing in the bushes? Why is that thing sticking up that guy's butt? And then you run away from it, but then you're like looking around the corner. I'm going to go back and look at that again. That's kind of where I want to be. I mean, I've said this many times. I try to occupy, as an artist, a place between the whimsical and the terrifying. That's where I live. And all my heroes did that.
Yeah.
Because they were making art about the human condition, which is not a nice thing all the time. It's hard. It's a hard world. It's a dark world.
Do you think that, like, recognizing that and then taking this imagery to these extremes, is that like a way of processing the fact that, like, life is fucking horrifying a lot of the time?
I'm working it out for myself that way, yes.
Yeah.
This is how I think about, this is me working it out because I care.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people who make work that is, or even music.
Sue
Suko is
one of my biggest freaking heroes. I love her. She's a good friend of mine, major influence on me. You know, Sue sells to a lot of museums, but Sue isn't the kind of work that you're going to put up in your kitchen, at your kitchen table while you're chowing down on that pork chop.
And
you know?
And a lot of artists, like, even thinking like punk rock, like musicians, like metalheads.
Yeah.
They're often people who actually are people who feel really deeply because it's a reaction to actually living in the emotional reality of a world where there are slaughterhouses and
school shootings
and all of it. Yeah.
We deal with it. That's how we deal with it. That's how I deal with it. Now, the larger projects that I do now, I look at it as learning events, like learning times. Like, so I'll spend 5 years making a whole series about gluttony, which is what I just finished, a new triptych. It'll be out this fall, late fall. Keeps getting pushed back. But it's funny, I spent 5 years dealing on a whole thing about gluttony and conspiracy theories and American gluttony in all of its forms, like, you know, fast food, conspiracy theories, religion, and violence. Americans are gluttons for all of that. So gluttony in the bigger way. And then it also sort of revolves around a food theme, bad food. And at the end of it, I decided to go. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I finished it, and then I went on a major diet. I changed all of my eating habits after spending 5 years making this whole thing about gluttony. And I didn't even realize it until Jim was like, you did this after the whole gluttony thing.
You're working it out.
And because I'm thinking about things that are a concern to me, and I'm learning as I'm doing, because there's a significant research element of the work that I do. So I'll spend 5 years on a project. There's a good year-long lead up to that before I commit while I'm finishing the previous project, where I'm like reading and studying about World War II airplanes and things for the next series, which is war. And that's how I'm processing things. And so my work is an extension of my what's going on in my head, the concerns, which is like Hogarth and Goya. I want to be a mirror to society. I want to hold it up and say, look at this, guys. We could do better, you know, and that's sort of what my work is about. It isn't easy. I'm not making shit to match people's couches. And I realize that's a hard thing. And it turns people off. People just don't want to deal. The people just do not want to deal. And I've scared off my fair share of curators too, which is really a lot of fun, actually. I won't name any names, but at big places, I've seen like big places like walk up to my work at the big print fairs and stuff. I'm like, no, I know I got them on technique, but when they realize what's going on, like when they've come face to face to a giant chicken woman's vagina right in their face in the dead center of a print, they kind of shake their head and run away really quickly. So I've seen that.
Does making like work, like you said, like the Hillbilly Contra Shoes and the Bloody Bucket, does it ever make family reunions awkward?
Well, we don't even want to talk about the family necessarily because, okay.
Okay, so, we can edit anything you want.
All right. So it's a very good question because my mom and dad are fantastic. They're amazing. And I don't know, my brothers and sisters, they're come and go with my work. They don't know for sure. But there was a point where I did a print called The Tommy Peepers, which Ann talked about.
Yeah,
there's a scene.
A good story.
There's a scene in there. The first scene is when my mom caught me looking at porn. But I also found when I was a kid, I found my mom's personal massage devices. And there was some shit in the magazine about this. And my dad saw it and he was like, Tommy, that was pretty rough. So I felt bad about it a little bit, but it went away.
Yeah.
But I'm just being honest, man. This is stuff I think about every day. I'm working stuff out from when I was a kid through my work.
Yeah. It's interesting. So when I've heard you talk about that before, the fact that art is a processing tool. So this idea of working things out, it actually reminded me of this moment that I think about all the time from the R. Crumb documentary, which I'm sure you've seen, is an incredible film.
I spent 4 days with Crumb in the south of France.
Shut the front door.
Yeah. I know Crumb. I went over there as a fanboy like 15 years ago, maybe 13. I don't know. It was 2006. 16 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I know people that know him, and there was an introduction, and I went over, and I stayed in his guest house for like 4 days.
That's amazing.
But that's aside. Go back to your question.
This is off air. I want all the Crumb goss.
You would not believe that week. It was unbelievable. But I wrote him a letter.
Yeah.
I was just that way. I've been this way since I was a kid. I wrote him a letter almost every year for like 10 years from the time I was like 13.
Oh my gosh.
Because on the back of the magazine, on the back of the comics, they had an address.
Yeah.
Right to R. Crumb or whatever. And I did, and I never heard anything back.
Yeah.
Never. But it didn't matter but go back to the Crumb documentary.
Yeah. So yeah, the Crumb documentary, which is actually filmed right before he moves to France. It sort of takes place.
He traded a whole thing of sketchbooks for a
chateau something. Yeah. And so but it also is looking back at his work, and there's a scene in it where he's being interviewed by a reporter, a female reporter, a young woman, and she kind of talks to him about how when she was young, she found her brother's Crumb comic books. And it was really disturbing to her. She got really freaked out by it.
And he's like, oh no, oh God. And he starts feeling guilty.
Well, and he says he says something really similar to what you say. He doesn't use the words "I'm working it out," but he says, "This is just me. This is what's in my head. This is what I'm putting on paper." And he even says maybe I need to have my pencils taken away from me. I don't know. Maybe I'm a monster, but I need to make this work, and it's out in the world. And I've always wondered if it's possible for artists to feel kind of ambivalent in that way, or to be neutral about the reception in that way, of just being this is it's just out there, and I washed my hands of it.
I don't think you wash your hands of it.
Okay.
I think you put it out there because you definitely want people to know what you're thinking.
Gotcha.
You make it for yourself first, but yeah, there is consideration of the audience. But it's second. Crumb is making that work for himself first. Yeah. He is a big Thomas Nast fan, George Cruikshank fan, Bruegel, Goya. He is an offspring of that. And the girl found the work when she was young. You know what? Tough shit, man. I'm sorry. Any kid now, even back in the 90s when that was filmed, you could turn it on, and cable TV existed. Any kid can turn on the television and see murder, sex, sex, sex. But for some reason, when they see a drawing of something, people get really worked up over it. More so than an actual video, I think, a lot of times.
Yeah,
because
I
think people have expectations of what art should be coming into it. They think it's Looney Tunes, which I love. But Looney Tunes are fucking violent, man.
Yeah. Itchy and scratchy. Yeah.
And all that stuff. Crumb said it best. He's like, they're just lines on paper, folks. That's really what they are. They're more than that, but ultimately,
they're more than that, though.
They're way more than that, but they really are. It's art. And I don't know what to say to that person. That it's hard. I say tough shit, but then part of me, because I'm a Catholic boy, I feel guilty for him, but he's being honest, and that is the highest respect that an artist can have for their audience, whatever it may be.
Yeah. I think there's really something to that, and that idea that I think it's a real academic expectation to sort of say, before you create anything, you need to know everything about it, rather than let's create it and see what I learned.
I know someone, this is recent, someone told me, they asked me a question about what are you going to be working on next? And I was like, well, I'm doing a whole thing about war. I'm going to spend probably 5 or 6 years making art about failed U.S. military endeavors.
Yeah.
You know? And broader than that, too, but that's the point where I start from. And this person was like, well, shouldn't you have fought in a war to be able to make art about it?
Oh, uh-huh.
And I'm like, no.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm curious, though, because I think that art does have... It's powerful.
I was about to say, it's very powerful.
It's very powerful.
It's
and
very powerful.
You know, I think that there is a responsibility that artists need to take if they're... I think, if they're making things that sort of can be, like, directly hurting someone or something.
Okay, here's the thing with that, and it's a very good point.
Yeah.
That becomes the issue. If they become policymakers.
Artists, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, uh-huh.
If I decided to run for Congress, can you imagine such a thing out there, the Hello Print Friend audience? Then it would matter. It's art. It's entertainment. Okay? It's a different thing. When those people decide are in power to actually legislate or enact change for real technical level, then I think it can be a problem. Otherwise, you get to pick and choose.
So I think it's a really interesting point, and I'm curious about how then you define art, right? Because I'm assuming there are, maybe not, but I'm assuming like in this ideology there are limitations, right? Like that someone saying something terrible and I don't know.
When it becomes exploitative, it's not art anymore.
Ooh, say more about that.
It's a hard thing to explain, I guess. When it's obvious that someone is cashing in at the expense of a marginalized group in some way.
Then it's no longer kind of protected into this.
That's the way.
Ideology.
Yeah, if there's a buck being made, definitely at the expense of the AIDS epidemic. It could be AIDS epidemic, anything where. I mean, that's even a gray area, but that's sort of how I see it, you know? But, oh my God, this is heavy. God, Miranda.
I'm sorry.
I thought we were...
I'm a philosopher.
It's okay. I get it.
We'll tiptoe back out of this minefield that we walked ourselves into.
Yes.
So I have a question about the experience of being Tom Hück. The Tom Hück experience,
I've never
if
heard
you
it
will.
framed like that, but okay.
Which is that I feel like you're one of the most talked about people in the print world. Your reputation precedes you. Evil Prints has a whole stature and an energy and a presence. And I guess my question is just sort of like, what's that like? Is it ever exhausting? Like, do you ever feel like you need to kind of perform? Like, I'm showing up at the conference, I need to bring the Evil Print energy.
Not
I have
anymore.
to show up.
I don't do that. I don't like the conferences anymore. I think they become too academic, but that's another whole... We got to do another podcast at some point. But to its general question, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And when I started this, I knew that so I'd come to Landfall Press and I had become friends with Tony Fitzpatrick. And so Jack Lemmon of Landfall, the legend, had introduced me to the legend of Tony Fitzpatrick. So we met. And I hung out in both ends. So I was hanging out at Tony's independent print shop, Big Cat Press, when I was like 24, 23. And I had made a couple of prints at Landfall, which is high-end art world print stuff. Okay? Tony's shop, every day was a visual feast of craziness and fun and irreverence and crisis to sell prints to pay the electric bill. And Landfall, it was the same thing, but they kept it really behind a lot of smoke and mirrors because they are Landfall Press Art World stuff. And so I learned from both of those ends. And Jack was like, Huck, you can do this. Mm-hmm. You just got to do it right, and you got to work your ass off, and it's very hard, but you can do this yourself, which is a lot coming from a master printer, print publisher, talking to somebody that's trying to do it in their garage. He saw a lot in me. And then Tony was like, when are you going to stop doing that schoolboy shit? Come and get tattooed. Let's go see some strippers. Okay? And I'm an impressionable young artist. And I had both of those worlds going at the same time via Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I learned the art print business at that level, which is a very high end. Meanwhile, I was teaching at the same time. And it was very difficult after a few years trying to do both. And so once I cut the teaching out, it was even harder because you don't have that money to fall back on that everybody is so used to, in the civilian world. And so I just kind of grew into the struggle of trying to hustle your prints to live. It's very, very difficult. But it's a lot of fun too, because I get to be me, and I get to wake up in the morning every day, and I get to make prints of like giant fictitious monsters, warmadillos, and I get to make prints about the first time I saw breasts when I was 12. I get to do this for a living, and people pay me to do it most of the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm still excited about print history. That's what gets me up every day. And to go into the studio is loving prints and print history so much that I want to be a part of it, and I want to be a part of that lineage. So at the end of the day, all the struggles of just trying to keep a shop alive with the ups and downs of the economy, the ups and downs of society, and all of that now going on 25 years, 26 years, 27 years, whatever craziness it's been. That's what keeps me going. What's it like to be me? It's very difficult, but it's also really stressful. It's fun. I get to hang out with the Outlaw Printmaker guys. Mm-hmm. They're my best friends. Carlos Hernandez is my best friend. John Hancock is a close second. Mm-hmm. And I talk to those guys every day. Yeah. And it's a lot of fun, too. It's hard and it's fun. I'd say it's 50-50, where it's a struggle to keep money and food on the table with your prints, but the trade-off there is that you get to have a life where creatively you're fulfilled, and a lot of times the art world can be a lot of fun. I mean, the print world, especially because it's a small group of people at the high end of things, and I'm not talking necessarily about the academic print world. That's a different world than the print shops that are having to publish the latest print to keep the electric on. Yeah. Buy the latest print by the blue chippers or whatever. It's different. But it is part of the umbrella. There's an academic part and then there's the non-academic part. And one is more art world and one is more academic art world. But they tend to get together every once in a while at conferences from time to time. But living in that ecosystem, if that's what you want to call it, can be really fulfilling. Yeah. And me, I just was myself. I've always been myself. I like heavy metal music. I love Dur. I like drinking. And I like strippers a lot.
You used to?
I used to. I'm better now. But I was honest about it. Like Crumb, I made art about it. And that pisses people off. I'm just being myself. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, Miranda. I know that. I have enough self-awareness now. I used to think it was just like, oh, well, everybody is like this. No, they're not. But it comes with a trade-off. I've been divorced twice. Starting to think it's me. But I'm just honest in my work and in who I am. And prints for me was perfect because of the drawing aspect, but it also is a way to get my ideas out there. Like, even though I'm the first wave, first audience, it also allows you to get multiples out and affect a lot of people. And that's fun. It's fucking fun making prints, man.
Yeah.
And there's also the community thing around a press. People help each other print and all that stuff. You meet groups of people that are printing things, and the Outlaw Printmakers sometimes we've helped each other print, and it was just, I got lucky, and I fell into a really good group of people that really helped being able to talk to Bill Fick about, oh God, how in the world did you keep the electric on in New York?
Yeah.
Selling prints.
Yeah.
I mean, who am I? I couldn't talk to my professors about that.
Yeah, it's a different world.
Because they're not doing that. They're drawing their income from another entity, whereas Bill is having to send posters out to print shops to compete with the big E's and the Tamarins and all that. He's competing with them because he figured out, I'm going to send out posters to Cockeyed Press. And I saw that when I was a student. I was like, Cockeyed Press, they must be a big print place. And I show up out there and he's sleeping under his press in a closet on Commerce Street in New York, But there is some joy in the struggle too. There is this weird thing where this is part of being me, and what it's like to be me is if you can figure out a way to get people to buy this work, there is a high that comes off of dodging the bullet of impending bankruptcy.
It's like the extreme sports of the art world.
It's totally. If you're able to pay the bills with selling a print about back to the pirate humping a woman in an outhouse with a dog humping the leg, if you can manage to figure out how to get somebody to buy that and pay a bill with it, you've won. You fucking won, man. And that's where I am. I mean, I'm lucky. I have collectors. I have subscribers that buy one of everything I do. I have a museum archive now, the St. Louis Art Museum.
Yeah.
They get one of everything I get until I die. And I'm very fortunate. But a lot of it comes from having those people like Jack Lemmon and Tony and Bill Fick and a host of other, and Ted and Marianne Simmons, and people that saw something in me from very early on. And, you realize the further you get into this, people that do this, even if you're able to, as fortunate as I am, to be able to sell to museums, and nobody has any money.
Yeah.
It all goes back into the work. We just live to, the projects get bigger and more expensive. So that's what it's like. It's me, what it's like to circle it back. What's it like to be, I hate talking about myself in the third person. What's it like to be Tom Hück? It is constant struggle between trying to be a good boy, figure out how to pay the bills, and make my art. That's what it's like. I don't, there's not anything else in my life.
No more space.
There's no more space for anything else. I mean, I build my life around my art. I don't build the art around the life.
Right.
I don't just, I'll get into the studio this weekend and make some stuff, and then I may not get in for another 2 months. No. I work every day in the studio trying to make print history. And I take it very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that also eases the criticism too, because I know, I can back this shit up with history. Some of the darkest fucking prints that have ever been made were during the fucking plague, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sex in all those prints. It's just that we don't tend to think of it in the same realm because they're now on museum walls with a placard by it that spells it all out. I'm sure in their day there were plenty of people that didn't want to look at a Durer print because they couldn't deal. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, and I think too, kind of also reflecting on what you say, some of it might just be like the shock of like I can't deal, but I think some of it was like, well, that's not in the best of all possible tastes. It's like it has to do with like a perceived rule book of what is appropriate and what is not in life.
Well, I'm going to tell you, and all the outlaw printmaker guys and gals, we all come from heavy metal,
right,
as a background in the late 70s and early 80s when we were growing up. And when you are nursing at the teat of Ozzy Osbourne, you look at those album covers and that music as art. Especially with me living in a rural area, I put it all together as art. I didn't think that music is art, and so we all have that influence, and we didn't allow the art school over intellectualizing grind it out of us like a lot of people allow that to happen with themselves. Joe Blow might like the Partridge Family, but once you go through art school, I don't even know if anyone out there knows who the Partridge Family is, but it's the most syrupy, pretentious pop that you can imagine. It's like the fucking Backstreet Boys or something like that. If you allow that to be ground out of you by over-intellectualizing and overthinking every single move that you make visually as an artist, you kind of become embarrassed about admitting that you like that stuff, thereby negating it as an influence. I never did that. I'm very influenced by the music of AC/DC and Motorhead and Iron Maiden, especially the art that went along with the packaging. Me and Carlos and John, and Sean and Bill too, we don't distinguish the difference between a Boris Vallejo fantasy artist painting and a Basquiat. Mm-hmm. They're both art.
And is this kind of like the core, would you say, of like what an outlaw printmaker is?
It's part of it because we, early on, even though we didn't like say, we are going to have a mission statement. We never did that.
We have a board. And
we have a board.
Meetings.
This is we don't have meetings and stuff. We don't do that. It was like Tony named it and then just was like, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm too cool for you young nuts, And we were like, yeah, Tony named it Outlaw Printmaking. Let's go and let's do it. And we had a show that was called the Outlaw Printmakers in New York. A small show in a freaking basement someplace. And it was really well attended. But I think we ended up getting together mentally and aesthetically and narratively a lot of times over all of our common interests of a love for old master prints, comic books, skateboards, heavy metal music, and being a pain in the ass when you're 24, 25 years old.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, it was a male-dominated group of dudes. Obviously,
most group of dudes are.
Groups of dudes, that was the wrong way to say it. It was very a macho thing. It still is to this day. But I mean, you can't let everybody into every group, otherwise there'd be no groups. And so, like Catherine Polk and Julia and Erica Walker
and Sue and
Sue. Well, Sue's not really. She's a fourth mother.
Okay.
But they influenced us. Richard Mock, Sue Coe, way before them, Katie Kolowitz, and all of they were the influence to make emotional work. Work about social commentary and criticism and all that stuff. And so that's where it comes from, are those artists. But eventually, the women came along that look at that. Yeah, you want to be in a show with us. And then they kind of became part of the group. At first, it wasn't. there were just not a lot of women that we could find because when we started, there was no Google.
Right.
You couldn't just hop on Google and look up badass women printmakers. It got to you slower, And Catherine Polk, we didn't even know that she made prints.
Oh, really?
For the first 10 years that we knew her, because Andy, her husband, Andy Polk, had us all as visiting artists out at the University of Arizona, and Catherine would drive us around. She was the one that took care of us and made sure we were eating. And and she's awesome. And then years and years go by, and then I saw a Catherine Polk print. I was like, that's not the same person. Could it be? She wasn't broadcasting it everywhere.
Yeah.
So these things got to us in a slower way. So that's how that. But yeah, we were all bonded over stuff that functioned pretty much outside of academic aesthetics and things that were looked at as populists a little bit. It's too of the people. It's not, we can't sit and look at a H.R. Giger painting and really assign too much to it because the public loves it, so it can't be good. That elitism, we're against that.
Yeah.
We're very much against the elitist art stuff, even though you're selling to museums and stuff. I mean, yeah, I realize it's a weird thing, but the initial impetus of doing outlaw printmakers and that kind of thing was an alternative lifestyle that was outside of academia and not academic prints, which when we came out, we were really sort of much trying to bring it back to what we loved about prints, which were like social commentary and criticism and crazy imagery and Hogarth and Dewar and Posada. And also you throw in the skateboard stuff with it, the skateboard graphics by Pusshead and on and on and on. And Joe Pitano did the Motorhead album covers and all that wrapped up in heavy metal music, old master prints, and fantasy art, whatever you want to call it. That's it. And a lifestyle of kind of not giving a fuck.
But
about,
still,
but you do
giving some fucks, though.
You do give a fuck about the art. You don't give a fuck about whether or not necessarily when you're young, whether you're going to be able to pay the rent of it or not.
Right. Yeah.
Which you end up doing.
Yeah.
Somehow. I always felt that if you're in it for the right reasons and you're doing it from your heart and you're doing it from your soul, the bigger stuff tends to work itself out.
I love that.
And more often than not, there have been times where I am in the studio and I can give you an exact what it's like. This is to keep going on it, if that's okay. What it's like to be me. Okay. There was a time my studio assistant, Travis Lawrence, he's fantastic. He was my assistant for years, and we were sitting there in the studio at Evil Prince, and I was literally, they're shutting the power off in the morning. Okay? I haven't made a car payment in 2 months. They're going to come and get my car.
Yeah.
We don't have any paper. We don't have enough ink to do this block that I just finished. Delilah, my daughter, needs shoes for school. This is all in one morning. And Travis is like, we're fucked, man. And I'm like, I know we are, Travis. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I needed a certain amount of money to just pay the rent of the studio. And across the street from the studio was a gas station, a little Shell station, had an ATM in it. And I thought, okay, if I go over there, I got like $35 in the bank right now in the Evil Prince account. I know it'll let me overdraw.
Yeah.
I went across the street. I go, Travis, I'm going to go do it. I can maybe pay part of the rent and part of the electric. So I went over across the street. It let me take out $800.
That's a pretty good overdraft.
I know. And
yeah.
I kind of, this was not a good thing because I knew that station, whatever brand of ATM,
So it was the ATM.
It was something to do with that. And I drew out $800, so I was overdrawn. And you had to make multiple withdrawals. So it's $35 each time. So it's going to be $1,100 probably. Mm-hmm. That I knew, okay, I'm just putting the money down to gamble here. I drew out the money. I went over and I got a I went to the post office. I got a money order to pay the rent, and then I somehow paid the electric in person, and I went back to the studio, and I told Travis what I did. I was like, man, I don't know how we're going to get through this. We live another month. Mm-hmm. Evil Prince lives another month. That's in the morning. Okay? Still didn't have the money for Delilah's shoes. Still didn't have the money for the ink or the paper. But at least the doors are open. And maybe somebody will come in and buy a print in a couple of weeks. Maybe.
Yeah.
So I went back to my work area. It was now 1 o'clock. I went and checked my email. And I got an email from the Janet Turner Print Museum.
Love them.
At Chico.
Yeah.
And they somehow, the transformation of Brandy Baghead was named their print purchase of the fucking year. And they're like, do you have any left? I'm like, fuck yeah, I got them left. And they're like, where can we wire the money? How much is it? And I was like, 12 grand, man. And the next day, there's 12 grand in the Evil Prince bank account. Well, actually, 11,000.
Right. Where's the
like
overdraft?
10,900, right? And it's still like that to this day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is not changed. It's just the paychecks are bigger and the bills are bigger. And there are not a lot of people, and I understand, that can do it like that and live their creative life like that. But I'm in this for the long haul, and I'm going down with the ship. Because I made that decision a long time ago without knowing that was the decision I made. There was some instinctive thing that knew that this is what it is. It's a warrior for art life. And I take that very seriously. And that's why I am who I am. And so all the criticism that's leveled at you, I'm playing a long-term game here. I'm playing a history game. I'm not playing oh God, somebody shit on me in the New York Times because they don't like the print that I did about a hillbilly sex position. I'm not in it for that, man. I'm in this for the history of it. And I'm in it for my heroes. And I'm in it to make prints that my heroes aren't able to make now. I'm their voice and carrying it on. And then maybe 150 years from now, some kid will come along and find one of my prints, and that'll make them want to make those kinds of prints that say something and aren't just show up in a flea market because they match someone's couch. That's what I'm in this for. I'm in it for the history. And when you're in it for the history, you don't think about things that civilians worry about, like, oh God, how am I going to, I need a new car. I got to have the newest car that's out. I'm going to have a truck that's worth more than my fucking house. We don't think like that. That's not even in the realm. It's how am I going to be able to make this print, to buy a can of ink or buy that paper or fund my next project so that I can make the stuff that's going on in my mind. See, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
That's where I exist. And all my friends are that way too. The good ones, the good artists. That's where all the good ones are, and the stuff that I like to look at. And that's where my heroes were. I'm sure of it. So does that explain it?
I feel like that is the perfect note to wrap up on. I love the like Tom is going down with the ship. Like
That's all you got?
Yeah.
Are
Really
we
glad.
friends now?
Can we be friends?
We'll be friends now.
Yay.
We're okay. Because I had to have my ego stroke somehow. Because you can explain to people in the future why I didn't want to come on.
Wait, because
Make some shit up.
Oh, okay.
When in doubt, print the myth, man.
Let's see.
I'm all about drama. I'm all about the drama, in especially in print world circles, because the stuff gets so blown up and overblown. I kind of like that, some of that.
You're a mixer.
It keeps things interesting.
Well, I think we can, officially draw the curtain on the long-standing feud.
That's the way you do it.
Yeah.
There's a feud.
There's been a feud. We've been the Hatfields and the McCoys
It's
of the
not
print
really.
world.
Yes, exactly. An unspoken feud.
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't even know.
No.
And, we can say that there's peace in the valley again.
There's peace in the valley.
You no longer have to choose between Tom Hück and Hello Print Friend in your Christmas card list.
That's right. But my friends, who some of us, did think it was kind of cool that I said no the first time. So, oh my God, now it's like, okay, all right. You caved, you tough dude. You caved.
Wait, why'd they think it was cool? Just because it was like, I don't need that publicity? Yeah.
There was that, and
You're too Hollywood. You were too Hollywood for a Hello Print Friend.
And I was just really worried that there was too much out there coming out at one time. That's really what it was. People are going to get tired of, oh, fuck, Huck's on everything now. Okay, he's full of it, full of himself. I don't need to hear this story again.
Did Anne ask you before me? Or did you pick Anne over me?
No, Anne asked me a long time ago.
Oh.
That thing was recorded a year ago.
Oh, really?
Because they did
they
did it way in advance, and then I think there were some issues of what. There probably were COVID issues. It was in everything. And then, that was a long time ago. And it didn't come out for 7 months after that was recorded. So, But I think it's cool that you're doing the back with Anne. You two are kind of like talking about each other. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
And
I was actually taken aback by that. Because naturally, I assume that everybody's warring.
Wait, really? You thought I'd be like...
I don't know. I think Landfall hates Crown Point, or Bud Shark hates, Tandem. I know it's not that way.
That's so
but
funny.
You kind of imagine, like I said, the myth.
The myth, yeah.
The competitive myth.
See, I can't do that. I make myself sick,
I know, but see, I get some of that. Now, he'll hate this, but I get some of that from Tony, too, because Tony and I have a little competition, although he would never admit it. Tony and I have a little competition going because he's my big brother.
Yeah.
He really is.
Yeah.
And there's that okay, Tom, okay, whatever, Huck. Calm down. Mm-hmm. This isn't that exciting. Come on,
Yeah.
Calm down.
Like a big brother does.
Totally. Calm down. I've seen all this, But he's awesome, and I love him. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is going to be a really fun episode, and just, thanks for taking time out.
Hey, it's fine. It's great. I've enjoyed it a lot, and it helped that we were both in the same town.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah, it worked out. That can be your excuse when your cool boys are like, Tom would be like, well, she cornered
the
me.
Cool boys?
Yeah.
Carlos would be like, what happened, Huck? What happened? I'm going to lie and say you paid me. She gave me tons of money, Carlos. Well, I want that treatment too.
From the deep pockets of the Hello Print Friend bank account.
Bank account.
Yeah.
Which you're probably doing the same thing, going and overdrawing the account so that you can keep.
Well, that's why I knew that 800 was a good deal.
It's a good deal.
It's a good deal.
I don't think they do that anymore. But I did.
Yeah.
All right. Very nice. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Tom. If you like today's episode, we have a Patreon where you can help us keep the lights on and get bonus content, like Shop Talk Shorts, where our editor, Timothy Pauschak, digs deep on materials, processes, and techniques with past guests. Also, if monetary support isn't in the cards right now, you can leave a review for us on your podcast listening app of choice, or buy something from one of our great sponsors and tell them Hello Print Friend sent you. But as always, the very best thing you can do to support this podcast is by listening and sharing with your fellow print friends around the world. And that's our show for this week, and the end of Outlaw October. Join me again next week when my guest will be Juana Estrada Hernandez. We talk about her practice exploring the immigrant experience in border politics, her incredible story of going to art school, her newly minted MFA, and her life as a DACA recipient. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.